Wanted to point out a couple of things. This gentleman who owned this bike before me did put an aftermarket fuel filter in line. That's a good thing. I love these little things. They're so cheap, they're so lightweight, they're never in the way, and they do a good job of filtering the fuel. There's no sense in doing a carb clean if you're not going to flush the gas tank and get fresh clean gas in the tank. If I had a nickel for every entry-level tech came to me and said, "Yeah, Q, I did my carb clean perfect. I know it's perfect. I don't know why it ran great for 10 minutes and then now it won't. Now it's acting funny again." Well, did you flush the fuel out of the tank? No, you told me to clean the carbs. Yeah, I told you to clean the carbs for the purpose of getting clean fuel in the carbs. And then what did you do with the dirty old gas that was in the tank? Did you flush it? No. So it went right back in the carbs. So it's very important to always have a fuel filter in line somewhere. A lot of people rely on the strainer that's in these petcocks up in the fuel tank. I know that's a funny name, don't be critical, I didn't name it, but the Japanese call this, in their translation, word for it is a petcock. So when you take this out, you'll see there is a little filter in there. The problem with those little filters is once they're 5, 6, 8 years old, 10 years old, they start breaking down and they get little tears in them and they just get little goopy crudge on them and they're just not trustworthy. And dirty fuel can get through them. I evaluated my petcock, the valve itself, the fuel valve is the name I'd like to call it, and this fuel valve has failed. This one is supposed to be vacuum operated. This is the, let me get to where I can situate this. This is the valve, this is the nipple that the gasoline comes out of to feed the carburetor. You see it coming out there. This is the vacuum line so that it can detect whether or not the engine's running. When the engine's running, this gets vacuum and that allows the valve to work. This valve is designed to be a safety device and or a proper maintenance device, meaning when this thing is off, it will never flow fuel, ever, whether the engine's running or not. And the off portion is working. It's the on portion of the valve that has failed, because I can intermittently sometimes get it to flow gas. See that? Even when the engine's not running. See, that's in reserve. It is not supposed to flow gas when the engine's not running. That valve is supposed to stay sealed unless there's vacuum right here. So I can maybe take it apart and clean it up and see if I can get it to work right. And then I can trust the functionality of the valve itself to hold gas back when the engine's not running. Yeah, see, it's getting a little better just turning it. This is probably sitting somewhere for 10 years and probably just has gunk and stuff in it I need to clean out. But if you can't get that valve to stop flowing when the engine's off, or if you can't get that valve to stop flowing when there's no vacuum applied, you got to replace it or clean it or fix it. The floats in the carburetor are designed to hold fuel back up the line while the engine's running, and it meters it like a plunger in your toilet bowl. It's exactly how it works, the same way. But they're not designed, I repeat, they're not designed to be a shutoff valve. So when your engine's not running and the weight of all that gas in the tank, 40-something pounds of it, that 40 pounds is pushing down on that little nipple right there through the fuel line, through this filter, and that 40 pounds of force is pushing down on those floats. And those floats are not designed to hold back 40 pounds. So what does and what will happen is fuel will push its way back up the vent and or back up into the venturi of the engine. Now the reason most people don't notice it is because if it's in the engine, the next time they start the bike, it makes the bike a little bit hard to start, but then it clears out and goes and it burns out the pipe and stinks for 10-15 seconds and nobody ever notices. Sometimes the problem can get so severe it leaks out the vent line and comes out this hose and drips onto the ground. And then they see a puddle of gas underneath their bike. They think that's a telltale sign they need a carb clean. Sometimes it's a telltale sign that the valve isn't shutting correctly. So always make sure that your petcock valve, fuel valve, is only flowing gasoline when it's actually supposed to. Make sure you can turn it off if it has an off position. If it doesn't have an off position and all it has is on and reserve, then the off is when the engine's got no vacuum. So in that case, if all it has is on and reserve, make sure it flows well in on and reserve with vacuum, and make sure it doesn't flow at all without vacuum. So all fuel valves have an off position of some form or another. You may not be able to turn it to an off position. The off position might simply and automatically be when the engine's not running and there's no vacuum applied. But that valve needs to work. All right, so that's today's lesson on fuel supply. Looks like this one just needs a good cleaning, because now that I've messed with it a little bit. Oh, no, there we go. It's in the reserve position and it's flowing well when it shouldn't be. See that? This is an example of a failed valve. See? It's in reserve. Here it's on off. Now it's off because I turned it off. But watch this. In the on position, it's dripping and flowing a little bit. And on reserve, it's just pouring. Look at that. That's horrible. So, being as cheaply as I got this motorcycle, as inexpensively as I acquired it, I probably won't even bother cleaning it. I'll probably just go buy a new one. If it's less than $100, I'll just buy it and be done. So we'll get a new fuel valve, we'll clean the carburetors, and I'll see you then. God bless. Thank you. Okay, so supposed to be doing this in a clean workshop environment on a nice workbench, which I could take this to work and do it on a lunch break or stay after work one night and do it. But I'm just going to do it right here and just show you how to do it. So to get this done, in order to clean the carburetors, you got tops. All carburetors have some kind of tops. These are CV, where the slides come out the top, and the butterflies turn with a throttle cable up here. So there's actually two obstructions to the gas flow. Is the butterflies turning and the CV. Oh, look at that. They're timed to go past center, which is horrible from a racing situation. I'm not going to race this bike, so I don't care. But if I was going to race this bike, I would time those throttle bodies to stop right about there, because they time so far they pass center. They're actually going to restrict horsepower. But anyway, here is a stainless bowl that you guys, common like what you guys would use at home. I don't know what I paid for it at Kroger's, probably, I don't know, 10 bucks or something. But you want a nice stainless metal bowl, because you're going to be using some nasty chemicals to do carb cleans. I'm just going to pour gasoline in this one to do a basic clean of like all this grunge and stuff. See that grunge right there? Gasoline will clean that. So I'm going to use gasoline for that, and to clean the inside of the plastic caps and, you know, all the slides and everything. What gasoline will not clean, what gasoline will not do, is soak down into the carburetor bodies and the jets and clean old dried gas. Okay? Do the math, people. Fresh wet gasoline will not break down and clean old dried gas. It's especially more of a problem with ethanol now. It's even worse, but I gotta be honest with you, the problem existed before ethanol came out. Gasoline itself dries up and makes a flaky residue that sticks like syrup. And that stuff will line the inside of the jets and the inside of the Venturis and the carburetor bodies to the point where you can't get flow. You can't get gas to flow through. The reason people don't notice it on old trucks and automobiles is because the holes inside of the jets are so large that when the gasoline dries, it runs down the inside of the hole. Okay? So if you have an orifice this big and it dries up all inside of it like that and makes like residue in there, I can't do it with one hand, but if you have a hole and the gas dries and the residue runs down the side of that hole, it's not going to clog the hole if the jet is large enough. But the problem with these little motorcycle carburetors is the Venturi is small, so the jet that goes with that Venturi is even smaller. And the jets, I'll show you on the video here, the jets on these things are so tiny, the idle jets are, that it takes one strand of speaker wire to poke a hole through it. You have to take speaker wire, cut it apart, unravel it, and take one hair of it. And that's how you clean the inside of a pilot jet. Some jets are even smaller than that, and I have special tools from K&L to help me poke holes through them and clean them up. But generally speaking, motorcycles in general have very small jets, and the jet's hole sizes are so small that when gasoline dries up, it clogs them. And the same thing with the orifices all through the bodies of the carburetors. Again, we'll get to that in the video. So if you don't want to do carb cleans on bikes that you already own, the best thing to do is just take it out and ride it every 2 weeks. Every couple weeks, get on your bike, ride around the block. It does all kinds of good things. It flushes the fork oil through the orifices of the forks and lubes the seals. It moves the brake fluid in and out of the calipers, you know. It gets the juices flowing in the fuel system. It disturbs the gas and makes it go through. It just does wonders. There's only 2 ways to really hurt a Japanese motorcycle. Okay, I'm going to tell you the secret. You Harley guys, this don't apply to you, okay? I'm sorry. Very sorry, but it's just done. There's only 2 ways to hurt a Japanese motorcycle. Wreck it or park it. That's it. If you don't park your Japanese motorcycle, and by that I mean you ride it once every couple weeks, at least. If you do that, and you don't wreck it, and of course you got to maintain it. You got to put brake pads on it when they wear out. You got to do oil changes at the proper intervals. But if you don't wreck your bike or park your bike, I've seen Japanese motorcycles go multiples and multiples and multiples of decades.